We are going to be addressing our biggest questions for the NBA draft. We're going to do a full mock on Wednesday, but today we're just going to start with what's on our mind. And the first thing, Logan, is who do you expect to go second overall to the Charlotte Hornets, Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller?
Well, the Hornets reportedly really like Brandon Miller, and I do too. I think he's a really good fit alongside LaMelo Ball. The Hornets were one of the worst three-point shooting teams in all of the NBA last season. They desperately need three-point shooting, and that's what Brandon Miller brings to the table, man. He's got a really smooth, buttery stroke, 6'9", 200 pounds. So will immediately be a great spot-up guy alongside a lead ball handler in LaMelo Ball, but you're also getting a guy who has legitimate star wing scoring upside, super athletic, got a nice handle. He's going to be able to attack closeouts immediately at a really high level, but can get downhill. I think he needs to improve his finishing around the rim. I think that's his biggest flaw right now. I think he'll be a really good pull-up jump shooter, a really good shooter from behind the arc. If he can get better at getting downhill and converting attempts at the basket, he's going to eat. But again, man, there's a lot of things to like here, especially with the fact that he got to the line too, man. That's a really transferable skill that converts well to the NBA. Nearly 5 free throw attempts per game. He was super aggressive last year. So I think he's a better fit than Scoot. I think there are some redundancies there. Both of those guys better with the ball in their hands. Let me be clear. I like Scoot Henderson, but I just think there's a little more redundancy there. And I just think Brandon Miller's also a better prospect. So I think you're getting a guy that complements LaMelo Ball right now, but has legitimate superstar upside. And again, like I said, I think the Hornets like him too. So I think Brandon Miller goes to Charlotte.
I think some people are putting this in terms of why would you prioritize fit so much over talent and pass on a generational guy like Scoot, which, as we've discussed before, I think Scoot is great. I also think Brandon Miller is great, a guy with the potential to be a highly versatile, elite offensive weapon, fantastic shooter, pulling up and off the catch, coming out of handoffs, in transition, at his size with the legit advanced ball handling, some of the feel out of the pick and roll, patience, manipulation of defenders, some of the playmaking instincts. Not that it's all fully fleshed out and developed, but stuff that's really impressive to see from a college freshman at that size. And then with the potential to be a high impact secondary rim protector and to hang with guards as a legitimate point of attack defender, very good rebounder. I just think Brandon Miller is great and does so many things so well that his floor is pretty darn high, as is his ceiling. So when you consider that, I view him as a marginally better prospect than Scoot, very marginally, but a clearly better fit. Like, Melo runs the 5th most pick and roll in the league, man. And sure, he's not sharing the backcourt with somebody who would demand more primary ball handling duties. And he does have some off-ball value because of his pure catch and shooting. But he's a guy who wants to be dictating most possessions with his facilitating and pick and roll feel and whatnot. And I think Scoot is the tougher guy to fit into a backcourt with another ball dominant guard because he wants to dominate the ball and do so without a reliable jumper, which, although he's this explosive athlete and you can weaponize him as a cutter maybe in spots, it just makes him hard to fit into a role like that. So I think Miller gives them a go-to scoring wing. He fits the up-tempo pace that they want to play at. Very good transition player, runs the court well, athletic, and a weapon shooting in space, provides a much-needed defensive asset and potentially cornerstone on that end of the floor. And I think can honestly develop a pretty cool two-man game with LaMelo. He's never going to be like a good screener, but when it comes to slipping screens, ghost screens, getting himself looks from deep and potentially then going to work attacking closeouts and whatnot. There's just so many ways for Brandon Miller to have a positive impact on the game. And I think he is a more intuitive fit in Charlotte. And that is what the reporting says they think as well. So as we move our way to the third pick, the big story, Logan, has been, is Portland going to trade it, and to who?
I've said throughout the draft process, because this is probably one of the biggest storylines in the draft, I don't think Portland should trade this pick. I think they should just commit to a rebuild. I think We just talked about Washington waiting way too long to trade their asset. Look, man, if you trade Damian Lillard right now, you can set yourself up for the future. You can get a massive haul for him, a bunch of first-round picks, probably a rotational guy, quality guy right now with upside. You don't want to miss out on that, right? Because a lot of things can happen in just one season, and you don't ever know when that regression is going to set in. So I still think they should trade Damian Lillard to whoever's biting, and there's got to be somebody out there, right? Dame wants to stick to the grind. Apparently, Portland's with him in that, so I think they're going to stick this thing out, and they're probably going to move this pick. I think there are two trade destinations that make sense for both sides. The first one is to Chicago, who I have heard from multiple places wants to completely blow it up. I think you move number 3 in Nurkic, and I don't love it, but you got to make the money work because I don't think Nurkic and Vooch work, but Vooch is a free agent, so they can move on from him. Number 3 in Nurkic to the Bulls for Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso. You get a really good defensive guard. You get another really good bucket getter alongside Dame. I think that's probably the move, or DeRozan. I like that one probably a little less. You get another decent star alongside Dame, see if they can play winning basketball. I don't think it's a fix-all, but you're getting 2 quality guys. And the other one that I probably like a little more, that's to the Raptors. You move the same package, number 3 in Nurkic for Siakam, who I love, man. I think Siakam's severely underrated, just playing, not playing winning basketball there in Toronto, can do it all at the 5 spot. Pretty good defender, really good offensive weapon, can space the floor, can get downhill, can create for himself, is a good role man. Or maybe Anunoby and Trent Jr. I don't really think that's requisite value for the number 3 pick and Nurkic, but Anunoby's one of the best role players in the league. You're getting a guy with a flamethrower on him, and Gary Trent Jr., who can just get hot at the drop of a hat, sending him back to Portland. So those are my 2 spots. I definitely prefer getting the stars in Siakam or LaVine, but like I said, man, I don't really think that's the right direction that Portland should take. I think they're a lot better off exploring trading Dame, leaning into the full rebuild, and building around Simon Sharp, the guy that you get, and whoever you can get with that 3rd pick.
I legitimately think it would be disastrous for Portland if they trade this pick. And I think we will inevitably look back on their entire attempt to extend the Dame window and turn it into a contending roster as just a misstep, and feel like you would with the Wizards and Bradley Beal, that they just should have conceded defeat much sooner, even though you have this star who is great and who wants to stick around. And of course, Portland's roster has consistently been better than Washington. Dame's in a different tier than Beal, but the principle of them not being at that level and compromising their future to try to force it is ultimately the same to me. The Bulls one is interesting, but you would have to give up another big contract to make that work, which means probably Ant Simons or Jeremy Grant, at which point it's like you're giving up one of your legitimate plus impact guys, and I think a remarkable guard talent in Scoot Henderson, and you're not getting to the level that you need to. Most importantly, on the defensive end of the floor, Caruso is incredible there, but it's not single-handedly transforming you from the number 27 defense to a championship caliber one. And I think if you're looking at a Siakam trade, it's just the same thing. It's not going to push you over the edge to me. The other ones that we've heard rumored are maybe Karl Anthony Towns, but it seems like that package would require, again, Scoot. That's how I'm viewing it. It's the number 3 pick, sure, but it's probably going to be Scoot Henderson, who's a fantastic prospect. Anthony Simons for contract purposes, and then maybe a pick on top of that. Zion, you would think, is something similar. It just doesn't make sense to me. You are still going to be defensively inept. Cat is not fixing that. Zion is not fixing that. Not to mention both guys have availability issues. Zion to the extreme, obviously. You are not going to have comparable role players to the best teams out west, and you are going to butcher your future in this wild goose chase for something that is just not attainable. Like if they added Cat or Zion at that price where they're giving up the number 3 pick and Ant Simons, would you take them over Denver? Certainly not. Would you take them over either LA team? I don't think so. Would you take them over Sacramento? I probably wouldn't. Like, that is an elite offense that frankly is less flawed defensively maybe than what Portland is working with. I still probably wouldn't take them over the Warriors because of the two-way ceiling there. So I just think they have to go in the opposite direction. We're hearing reporting about them talking with Miami. It's all so muddied up what's going on in terms of their direction. But I think if you get a haul for Dame, Tyler Hero, a couple of firsts, and then whatever remaining cap filler you need, and then I would probably look to flip Hero, honestly, at some point, because I think then you're looking at too much young backcourt talent, and he's probably my least favorite of the bunch. But then you're cooking with gas, man. Like, Shaedon Sharpe, I think, is a phenomenally talented, hyper-athletic, dynamic shooting young guard. Ant Simons is legitimately one of the best pick-and-roll scorers in the league, a special shooter with developing playmaking. And then Scoot would be like the cornerstone. He would be the guy who you think can turn into an all-NBA guard confidently down the line. So it just makes so much more sense to me when they can have such a promising timeline in the works and they can continue to add assets to strengthen that timeline because Miami does have those picks to give up. That just has to be the direction they go. And I am praying that it is. A blockbuster for some other star would be fun. You know, it's vintage NBA offseason stuff, but it is not the best for their organization. All right. Logan, who do you view as the biggest boom or bust prospect in this class?
I've got two guys written down. The first one that I'll start out with is Gigi Jackson, who I mentioned in our lottery projection last time. And yeah, man, there's a wide range of outcomes for Gigi, right? He's 6'9", 215 pounds, and his game is really smooth, aesthetically pleasing, especially if you put on the highlights, because I've noticed, Carson, in those, they don't miss a lot of shots. That's one of my favorite things about highlights. Gigi, at his best, looks disgusting. He looks like, clearance Carmelo Anthony. He looks like Kevin Durant out there. His strides are massive. He's got a really wide handle, and it allows him to get into space with ease. And then when you talk about tough shot making, he's got it all. Smooth step backs, fadeaways, turnarounds, all kinds of off-the-dribble creation that you look for in star wing scorers. And so all those boxes are checked. What's the one issue? He is a massive black hole on offense. He does not play team basketball. His shot selection is horrendous, and he doesn't really get downhill all the way and create elite rim pressure. He shot 38% from the field, 32% from deep, was literally the definition of a black hole on offense. If it was his possession, it was his possession. I also don't know about his attitude, man. He got benched one time during this regular season, Carson, for an outburst on Instagram Live where he got pulled from the starting rotation. So there's some major red flags there. And again, I don't think Gigi Jackson is a guy that's going to crack a rotation immediately. I think he needs to spend some time in the G League and refine his game, get more accustomed to the NBA game. And that is playing unselfishly, that is playing hard on defense, and that is, just playing team basketball and cleaning up his shot selection. So there is a very, very wide range of outcomes with his game. Also, I have to mention, he's the youngest prospect in this draft. So yeah, there's a wide range, I think, with him in terms of his NBA game. The other guy I want to point to, who I didn't mention last episode, he's projected to go late in the first round. That is Dariq Whitehead. There's a lot to like with Whitehead. He's a former top recruit, was Naismith Player of the Year in 2022, was formerly the number 3 ranked overall prospect, was the former number 1 ranked small forward. When Whitehead got to Duke, one of the first team workouts that he had, he suffered a foot fracture, immediately underwent surgery, missed a couple first weeks of the season with Duke, came back, just had no burst or explosiveness. Now, he is an elite shooter. Shot 36% on off the dribble threes, shot 40% on contested threes, shot over 43% on catch and shoot attempts, and shot nearly 43% on overall attempts from behind the arc. He is an elite shooter, and he has some smooth off the dribble creation too, man. Like step backs, fadeaways, all the stuff that I mentioned with Gigi, Whitehead has too. But every other facet of his game looks severely underdeveloped. The handle, the explosiveness off the dribble, defensively in terms of awareness, IQ, engagement, and in lateral quickness. So the reason that I say there is a boom or bust potential with Whitehead, he had a second surgery on June 8th to repair his foot. If that explosiveness and burst returns, you are looking at a guy that is maybe the complete package if all that comes back. If it doesn't, you are looking at a guy that maybe is just a pure spot up shooter. And we've noticed in recent history, those guys don't normally succeed, right? I don't see him ever being out of the league because he is a pure shooter, but he could be a liability as a ball handler, as a defender, and just could really pigeonholed as a straight spot up shooter if those things don't return. So those are the guys that I think have the biggest boom or bust potential, probably more with GG Jackson. But I think if it's far-fetched, man, you know, we don't really see explosiveness and athletic burst return after you suffer a major injury like that. But if it does, Whitehead could potentially be a star. But those are my two guys that I think have a really wide range of outcomes.
So we sort of looked to different kind of prospects here. I would say the guys who I was thinking of were probably in a higher echelon where I'm a little bit more confident in the boom. With GG, I know you love him. I think that there's just a lot of issues there in terms of practical skill sets that translate, the inconsistency of his shot, obviously the very bad shot selection, the lack of consistently impressive playmaking, just overall not manufacturing easy, high probability offense. I just think you compare him to Melo, maybe there's a bit more Marcus Morris in there to me. And I think a lot of times
I want to
so many dudes out there with
clearance Carmelo, bro.
Clearance
Don't do me like
Melo
that.
affair, which maybe is honestly clearance Knicks Melo. Maybe that is Marcus Morris when he had a little bit more run of the show at a couple of his stops. But I just think there's so many guys out there that have pure game. And I feel like GG is one of those guys where, yeah, he has the moments, but not necessarily the all-around value that I would bet on translating. And then with Dariq Whitehead, yeah, I just love the shooting. I mean, you're right, pulling up off the catch, it's really impressive, but I agree with you. Below average ball handler, not a super dynamic on-ball creator, has his playmaking moments, solid instincts, but he makes a lot of mistakes there and just doesn't get to the rim. Shot 42% on twos this season, which I think is definitely a reflection of that. So those are both guys who I would look at as like late first rounders who I'm not super confident in reaching a high ceiling. My first guy here is actually a top 5 prospect, and it's Amen Thompson, just because I think he is so unique and there is no NBA comparison that I really like him. But the pure fact that his shot is so bad right now, like there's not a great NBA guard who has no ability to keep you honest with a pull-up three. Again, we've talked about you don't need to be good, but you need to be in that Ja Morant range where you can hit it in the low 30s, and a floater game, like something to really devastate drop coverage. Ja is a guy who has a really good floater game. So does every good pick and roll guard in the NBA today. And Amen does not have either of those attributes right now. I think his shot needs to be reworked mechanically entirely, and he's just really lacking in high level touch. So I would take him in the top 5 because I think he's one of the best athletes I've ever seen. Probably the quickest first step from a 6'7" dude with insane vertical ability as well. I think he is a uniquely gifted playmaker for that size, can make so many different passes, so creative, so much velocity, one-handed live dribble pick and roll situations, can hit anybody on the floor, great in transition, awesome defensive attributes. So I would think all of those things combined gives him a high enough floor to where he could find a way to be a starting guard no matter what. But if you have a guy who is commanding your offense and who can't beat drop coverage with pull-up shooting or a floater game, I could see that dragging him down significantly. Like if he's just a brutally inefficient scorer because of that. I like him a lot. I would bet on him panning out, but I do see that outcome. The other guy is one of your favorites in this class, and that is Keontae George, who I have as my number 12 prospect because I think he does some things at a level that almost nobody in this class does. Like the variety of shot-making tools he has in his bag from the perimeter is ridiculous. His ball handling is dynamic. There is this fluidity, this ability to hit step backs, tough pull-up jumpers consistently that is so impressive. And then he has these great moments as a playmaker too, as we've talked about, where he's really creating advantages, and he's making these impressive lobs and whipping passes to the roller and trying to fit these tight window bounce passes in, but he makes a lot of mistakes there. He averaged more turnovers than assists last year, and I don't think that he's going to be like a significant plus defensively to where that raises his floor. So he really struggles to create high quality, easy looks from two. Like, he was 42% inside the arc. And I think a guy who didn't create a ton of looks around the rim because he doesn't really have that high end first step, and had a lot of tough finishes around there because he's not this overwhelming vertical athlete. So because of that pull-up shooting ceiling and the shooting ability all around, because of the handle and creation and some of the pick and roll feel and playmaking, I could see him being a star, but it's not a very common mold. Again, most of the stars in this league can get into the paint with regularity, create high quality looks there. And Keontae hasn't shown that ability consistently, but he's got some special, really intriguing traits. Let's take this out to a team perspective, Logan. Who do you think is under the most pressure to nail this draft?
I think it's imperative that the Dallas Mavericks hit the nail on the head with their first round pick. You just think about how disgruntled Luka Doncic seems in Dallas, right? You don't know how much longer you have with him, how much lack of success he can deal with. This last season, specifically the end of the year, I mean, look really disengaged, just look down. They go 8-12 with Kyrie Irving after they add him, don't make the playoffs, throw in the towel in that last game. You have got to get back to contention because Luka's one of the best 5 guys on the planet, man. I'm taking, very few players over Luka. And if there's another disappointing season, there's a very high chance that at the end of it, he goes, I want out of here, deal me, find me a trade, another team that I can go to. The rumors are saying that Kyrie Irving has a very limited market for him in this free agency. I understand why. And so it looks like Dallas is going to be able to retain Kyrie. So what do you have to do with the surrounding assets? Well, you've got to get a guy who complements Luka and Kyrie well, and especially can really play defense at a high level. So I'm hoping that somebody like Taylor Hendricks or Jarris Walker is available there, because you want to check 2 boxes with the guy that the Mavericks draft there in that spot, and that is immediate play, plug-and-play potential alongside these 2 guys who can play defense at a high level immediately off the bat. I think Walker and Hendricks tick that box. And then the other one is legitimate upside to where they're not just a guy who's going to be a role player and a rotation piece, but a guy that can be not a superstar, but a really good complementary, somewhere in that 15 to 20 point per game range, along with being a great defensive asset. And like I said, they complements both those guys. And I don't know if there's another team that's in that realm in terms of has to nail this draft. I think Dallas is head and shoulders, because it's dire straits, man. If they don't nail this on the head, Luka Doncic could be gone in this upcoming offseason.
Totally agree. Dallas has to be number 1 on this list, and lucky for them, they retained their pick, which was top 10 protected. They land right at number 10. I think you laid out exactly the kind of player they have to hope falls to them at 10. Jarris Walker, I don't think that's going to happen. Taylor Hendricks would be a dream come true. I just think they really need a 2-way wing, because the whole appeal with Kyrie was, we're going to add this other great dynamic offensive creator. They were already a really good offense. They're probably an even better offense with Kyrie, but this was the number 6 team in terms of offensive rating last year, but they just decimated their defensive front court, which was already teetering. Bye-bye Dorian Finney-Smith, and they just really, really struggled on that end of the floor. So Hendricks is a guy out of UCF who is going to play that modern 4 role, who can guard multiple positions, who's a great shooter, who can attack mismatches out of the post, like just an all-around positive impact kind of guy. I would love that for them. Outside of that, though, I'm a bit concerned because that late lottery range, there's not a lot of those like 2-way wing kind of guys. Like the next on my list who meets that criteria might be like Bilal Coulibaly, Wemby's teammate, who was just way too raw to be thrust into a win now situation like that. So I don't know. They might need to do some praying. I regard a guy like Grady Dick very highly, who I think will be there. I think his offensive skill set is perfect, but again, it's just not fixing their defensive issues in the front court. So they only have so many options who really fit there, ideally, and we'll see if they can land one of them. I'll throw out a couple other teams that I think have a lot of pressure on them. Number one is Washington, because they are now pivoting. As we talked about with the Beal trade, they have not landed that cornerstone prospect. They're picking 8 here, which isn't great, but there's a chance they could get like a real high upside guy, because this is a strong draft. I think they should be looking for a dynamic guard a la Asar Thompson, Anthony Black. I love Taylor Hendricks. I don't know that a guy like that is moving the needle in the same way. I think take a big swing. Those are big guards, plus athletes, high two-way ceilings, shooting questions for both of them, but real playmaking value. Black is going to be more of that like primary ball handler type. Asar is maybe a secondary ball handler, but who just impacts the game in so many ways. Transition, playmaking, potentially could be a capable spot-up shooter. And then I think Orlando. And the reason I think Orlando is because they have 2 lottery picks, and they are in a position now where they're legitimately close to accomplishing meaningful stuff. Like with Paolo, with Franz having developed into the player that he is, with a guy like Wendell Carter Jr., just good front court player, Fultz coming back, being healthy, legitimately good. Like this could be a playoff team next year. And more importantly, this could be one of the league's best teams if they continue to nail these picks down the line. So I think there's multiple ways they could go at 6. They could try to get that sort of lead guard with an Anthony Black. They could try to add another like big wing /4 with a Jarris Walker or Taylor Hendricks, versatile skill set. I don't like that as much, just because I think Paolo and Franz are already just big guys in the front court. I would prefer that they add more of like a 2-3 kind of wing as instead of a 4 type, but maybe it's Cam Whitmore there. You just add an absurd athlete with some shooting and two-way potential. I think my favorite though would be Asar Thompson for them, because you're getting a freak athlete who doesn't have to dominate the ball, but as I just mentioned, can do so many complementary things. If Fultz isn't the kind of guy who I would like avoid taking the best player available for necessarily, but I think Asar probably would be the best player available if he's there. And I do think Fultz is legit good. He's definitely not a guy who they need to look to replace, and he fits with their timeline. He just turned 25. Then at number 11, I think they're probably best suited looking for like a really high floor, super skilled guy, a Grady Dick, a Kason Wallace, dudes who I'm just super confident in translating. But Orlando can really, really, really build something if they nail this draft. So I do think that there's actually some pressure on them. All right, Logan, who do you view as the surest thing in this class outside of the top guys? Obviously, I don't want you to say Wemby. Like, who are you just really confident is going to be a good player?
That's a guy you just brought up. I think it's Kason Wallace, and I've got him very high on my board, so he actually is one of the highest guys for me. You look at the veteran instinct that Kason has, his feel for the game, his poise and pace out of the pick and roll, his decision-making, and his ability to seamlessly fit into a team offense right now and play winning collaborative basketball. Out of the pick and roll, routinely kicks out to a shooter, relocates to the corner, right off ball, takes his time navigating through the lane, has a nice in-between floater and pull-up game, and is a legitimately good defender on top of that. A bit undersized, but he's got a really big wingspan. He's super strong. He just moves really well. And I know you don't. I think that Kason has legitimate star upside. I can see this guy being one of the best two-way guards in the league one day. His scoring skill set isn't nearly as developed as other guys, but I think it could come with time, that creation off the dribble, right? He doesn't have insane burst. I think he makes up with that with pretty good change in pace. But yeah, off the bat is just going to play winning basketball wherever he goes, man. Just veteran instincts, IQ, and he brings legitimate two-way upside, man. But my favorite things about him offensively, that feel out of the pick and roll, his perimeter shooting, and his willingness to just play unselfish basketball, man. I think Kason Wallace is as sure of a thing as they come in this draft, and I would not hesitate to take him, top 10. I think he's legitimately that good.
I have Kason at 11 on my board, but I think he is honestly the best pick for this category just because great decision-making, playmaking, plus shooting, plus defense. He does a lot of things really well. I just have him that low because I don't see the star ceiling due to just the lack of sort of dynamic shot creation, high-end athleticism, but I am super confident he's going to be good. So I guess I'll go with the other guy who I just mentioned for Orlando at number 11. I'm pretty darn confident that Grady Dick's going to be a good player at the next level just because he is a phenomenal shooter, 40% from deep, 85% from the line, doing so, coming off screens, highly active off-ball mover, great in transition. And then I just think he complements really any offense with his skill set, attacking closeouts, a guy who's going to cut well, crash the offensive glass, and legitimately a good playmaker, makes good decisions there, can hit the roller, can hit shooters, and he doesn't have that star potential, I don't think. The only reason I hesitate about putting him in this category is that I do think he's going to be a pretty average defender. He's going to compete there, which is why I'm confident he will be average, even if he doesn't have the greatest physical traits. I don't think he's going to get dogged, but average defenders who rely on effort in postseason scenarios can turn into exploitable defenders. And we have seen guys who are like really good regular season role players because of their pure shooting, fizzle out a bit, become unplayable in certain playoff matchups. I don't think Grady Dick falls into that category, though, because of his competitiveness and because of his offensive versatility. He's not just a shooter. He's a good playmaker, a good closeout attacker, all of those things. And I think that gives him a pretty darn high floor at the next level. Who's your favorite sleeper in this class, Logan?
So I've got two guys for this one. First, one of my dogs, Adama Sanogo. I've seen a lot of mocks project him late second round, some of them undrafted. And let me be clear about this. I don't think he's got star upside. I don't think you're looking at a generational big man or anything like that slipping late. But I think he's a immediate rotational big man with veteran instincts, IQ, and hustle. Super strong, 6'9", 7'3" wingspan, 245 pounds. I love his offensive game on the low block, on the post. Footwork, touch with both of his hands, strength, the way he weaponizes his physicality and strength on the low block. He's a dog, a hustler, a great rebounder, and I don't think he's going to be a dominant rim protector, but I think he's pretty switchable and pretty serviceable on that end. So I love Sanogo. I think he's a first-round guy just because, again, I think you can play him immediately in your rotation. And the second guy, I have Amoni Bates, former top recruit. I don't think Bates is going to be a superstar or anything, but I don't know, dude. You look at the tough shot making that he still possesses. He maybe could be like in the mold of a Chris Middleton, right? Because he doesn't have that crazy athleticism. He doesn't have that crazy burst, but he does have that tough shot making skill set, dude. It is disgusting what he can do off the dribble. So maybe he does pop, but I think he's an elite shooter, and with his size and wingspan could potentially be a plus defender one day too. But just a disgustingly good, tough shot maker. And that's why I wouldn't hesitate to draft him either.
So you went a little bit deeper for your sleepers than I did. I will say I like Sanogo too, not quite as much as you, but I think good touch, right? Physically imposing, smart all-around player, efficient guy, a really good length, even if he doesn't have all-around great size because of his height. And in a class that really is just lacking for good bigs, I could see him rising a bit. The Amani one is interesting, but it sort of reminds me of the conversation that we had with Gigi Jackson. It's dudes who have game, dudes who can be buckets, but can they impact the game positively? Because you're not going to treat Amani as a star. You're not going to run offense through him. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of Brandon Boston Jr. as a prospect, right? Both guys were super highly regarded coming out of high school, top 10 players in their class, not good college careers, but you see these traits like the handles at their size, the difficult shot making. And I liked BJ Boston as a prospect. I thought, hey, this guy's going 51st overall. Come on, he's got so much game. And then year two, obviously he's in a winning situation, but he's still not getting rotation minutes. And it's because he's not doing enough of the other things at a high level. And I sort of feel that Imani falls into that same category. Yes, there's upside. Am I confident in that upside panning out, even with the special moments? Not particularly. But is he more talented than your average 50-something pick? I mean, there's no question about that. And I do think that he's worth drafting. The character legal concerns are a nice little extra wrinkle to add in on top of being slight as hell and not passing the ball, all these things. But man, he is a crazy shot maker. My pick for this was a guy who was expected to go in the very late first, probably somewhere between 25 and 30. And that is Chris Murray, who, for those of you who don't know, is Keegan Murray, the number 4 pick last year, his twin brother. Played together at Iowa. The only real difference is that Chris is a lefty. But I think age is obviously the big dissuading factor here. Murray is going to be 23 when his rookie year starts, but I think he does a lot of things really, really well. I think you're looking at a guy who is going to be a versatile offensive weapon, good shooter, mismatch attacker, and a plus defender. I think he is, first of all, capable of being like a really good catch and shoot spot up guy at the next level. He wasn't great in terms of shooting in college, 34% from deep, 73% from the line. So maybe he's not quite the caliber of shooter that Keegan is, but I do think that he's good there. But then it's the number of ways that he can get a bucket within the flow of an offense or for himself. He's a very patient, physical driver with great touch. So he's not going to explode by you with like some crazy first step, but he does get where he wants on the court pretty consistently and then finishes well. 91st percentile post scorer. He's got this ability to spin into these tough finishes consistently, especially with that left hand. And then in transition, runs the floor well. Shooting like that is always a weapon. But it's beyond that. He's a good passer, decision maker within the flow of an offense. He's a good screener, which helps him flow into multiple different sort of actions and just grease the wheels of the offense overall. And then defensively is a bigger wing, pretty long, but also a strong guy who uses his body well, who moves his feet laterally really quite well. Good hands. A plus defensive playmaker, both forcing steals and as a shot blocker, who is highly switchable and super productive in college, man. Like his production is really pretty similar to Keegan. He's given you 20 and 8 with like a steal and a block a night for a good Iowa team. So no, he is not that caliber as a prospect. He's a year older, but I do think two-way value, mismatch attacking, shooting, multifaceted impact on both ends of the floor, even at this age, makes him a guy that I'm pretty darn confident in succeeding. And I would maybe take somewhere in the top 20 as opposed to like 30. I think that would be really good value.
Yeah, I've got him at like 23 or 22 on my big board. I've got him in that range of solid college guys who've been there for a minute, who are immediately, going to be able to get minutes in a rotation. The Colby Joneses of the world, the Julian Strothers, the Trace Jackson Davis. But like you said, man, I think he brings something to the table in terms of two-way value, especially that defense, man. I think that's a huge thing. There's a premium of big, strong defensive wings that I think every rotation needs today. And like you said, dude, there's late in the first round is where teams really need to start thinking about who can play immediately right now. And there's not like a deficiency in his game, right? He's going to play unselfish team basketball. He's going to space the floor. He's not just a catch and shooter, and he's going to be a good defender. I like him a lot too. I don't like as much as you, but I think any team that drafts him is going to be pleasantly pleased. You're getting a guy who can be a really serviceable role player for a long time, man. I don't think he's got like star upside, but I think he's a really well-rounded guy who can contribute to winning right off the bat, much like his brother did.
Yeah, he does things that every single team values highly, and I think that's going to translate. Last question we have here today, Logan. It's a bit niche, but I think it's an interesting one. So all of the former top 3 recruits from the 2022 high school class have fallen significantly in draft boards, that being Nick Smith Jr. of Arkansas and then Derek Lively II and Dariq Whitehead, who we already talked about a bit, both of them being from Duke. None of those guys expected to go in the lottery now. Out of those three, who do you think has the highest chance to redeem himself to pan out as an impressive NBA player?
Yeah, this is a tough question, man. I think Whitehead is going to have a job for a long time just because he's such a good pure shooter. I think there's always going to be a need for really good shooters in the NBA. I like Derek Lively, the second man, but oh, God, he's so raw offensively, dude. He's so offensively limited. Like, and I also just think he fouls a little bit too much defensively. Like he's a really raw guy. Like there's a lot to like, the length, the projectability. If he, hits his ceiling, like could be a great rim protector. I'd probably say Nick Smith Jr. though. I just like his game the most out of all of those guys. And the reason I say that, first, it's the pillowy soft touch, man. There aren't a whole lot of guys in the NBA or in this draft class in the NBA as a whole that have the touch that Nick Smith Jr. does. I am a sucker for guys with good floater game. If I see you hit one floater on tape, my eyes pop out of my head, my jaw drops, my tongue falls out like a cartoon dog. I'm sitting there going, "Ooga!" Like, wow, man, this guy's got a floater game. So I really like Nick Smith's touch and his floater game in the in-between area. That's one of my favorite things about him. He's got a tight handle. He's got crazy burst. He's a good cutter. He's flashed his playmaking skills. So I think there's a lot to like there. My one concern or a couple concerns with Nick Smith Jr., shot selection, right? He's not a great rim pressure. He struggles to get all the way downhill. That's a product of his, slight frame, his lack of, exceptional burst. So I think that's a big concern is just shot selection, team basketball, fully getting downhill, easy offense. And then defense, man. This is a guy they say he's 185 pounds, man. I really wonder if he's even that dude. He's a slight guy. So if he's in your starting rotation, if he's a sixth man, which I think immediately he's a spark plug guy, comes off your bench, you get him to run your second unit, give you some bench minutes, always going to be a guy that's going to get picked on defensively. So those are my big concerns, but out of all those guys, I mean, he's got the most star traits, the most translatable skill set, tight handle, good change in pace, and that soft touch, man. Like I said, I am a sucker for good touch and a good floater game, and so that really sticks out for me. I'm not completely sold on any of these three guys. I could see Lively being a great defender one day. Again, there's just a lot of red flags there for me. So I'd probably go Nick Smith Jr., man. I think he can carve out a role either as a starting guard one day, but I think has a role as a sixth man kind of spark plug, fill it up scorer off the bench from day one.
Yeah, I could definitely see him falling into that mold, which unfortunately is not the most valuable archetype, right? Like nobody really loves Jordan Clarkson all that much, but Nick Smith Jr. does some stuff out there where it really elucidates why he was the number one prospect. Like, yeah, you like that one?
I do
you
like
didn't
that
like
one.
it as much as an Emmanuel Quickly floater, though. He just has the look of a dynamic scoring guard when he's doing what he does well. The wiggle, the fluidity, the twitchiness, the hesitations, the overall handle, the shot making you mentioned, the touch. And then you see the more advanced stuff at times where you look at his pace out of the pick and roll, snaking, trapping defenders on his back. You like to see that. He has the playmaking moments. Defensively, has good length, gives good effort. I agree with you. His sturdiness is going to be an issue, but I mean, I do like some of the attributes there. It does feel like he may be a bit singularly dependent on his scoring, where he was wildly inconsistent at Arkansas. Like game to game, he could give you 0 or he could give you 25. So I view him as being like a just outside the lottery kind of guy, a couple spots ahead of Derek Lively II, who I also think can clearly carve out a role for himself more. Like maybe Nick Smith Jr. has the more impressive moments and the more aesthetically pleasing attributes. But I do sort of wonder if we're like headed towards a deficiency of just good rotational bigs. And this class, like there's 2 centers who are going to go in the first round potentially. And one of them is Victor Wembanyama, who's like nothing we've ever seen. And Lively might be the other. So even though he has some issues and isn't the most developed, there is some really intriguing stuff. Like 7'1" with a 7'7" wingspan, elite size. He is a massive target in the dunker spot as a cutter, out of pick and roll, throw it up there. He can get it. He's got soft hands. He's got above average finishing touch, and he's pretty darn coordinated for that massive size. He was a 97th percentile roll man. And then you do see moments with him of like solid playmaking instincts. Again, I like his finishing touch. His shooting ability is not impressive right now, 60% from the line, 15% from deep, but it's something that he tries. I wouldn't bet on it being a plus trait of his, but I also wouldn't rule it out entirely. And then he has just this ridiculously high shot blocking ceiling, 2.4 blocks per game and 20 minutes per game. You see there the insane physical attributes. And I do agree he fouls too much, but I still think he has pretty good timing, sometimes pretty good verticality. And I think he can be like a versatile, switchable defensive player. So that rim running, rim protecting, great frame, soft touch, some defensive versatility, those are things that every NBA team values. It's just some of the other areas where he's lacking, like no post game to speak of at this point. Not a guy who embraces the physicality, the finishing in traffic side of the game. Like he's not super composed in those situations and has this horrible habit of straight up passing up layups for tougher shots. Like he will have a guy beat, he'll have a step on him going left, and then he'll decide, oh, what if I turn back to the right and try to tough hook shot over him instead? Like he does that far too often. So I just think he's got a little bit of the deer in the headlights, gentle giant feel to him at times. And he's not a guy who possesses that higher level skill, but the physical attributes are insane. And the ability to just do those baseline things that make you a rotation big, he definitely has those. And then when it comes to Whitehead, yeah, I just don't love the fact that he's not going to have that kind of two-way impact that a Lively the second would to me. Right now, I really just think his selling point is his shooting and sort of what he was as a high school prospect. So I would clearly have him third out of those three. And I also like Nick Smith the most. So there you have it, guys. Bunch of draft thoughts from us. We are going to be doing a full mock on Wednesday. And then on Thursday, we're going to be live during the draft with none other than Colin Cowherd for the first pick, and Jason Timpf will be with us for the first few picks of that draft as well. So super pumped for that. Get your timer ready for the Nerd Sesh draft live stream on the Volume YouTube page, where if you are watching us now, it'd be great if you subscribed. If you enjoyed the content, you can also catch us across all audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. You can follow us across social media, Instagram and TikTok at NerdSesh, Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. And you can join our Discord if you just want to talk basketball, football with us whenever. That is at the link tree in any of our social media bios. And you can buy our merch on the Volume store, hats, hoodies, shirts, Nerd Sesh flag. Go get you some of that. It's pretty sweet. And we're super excited to have that out there for all you guys. So with that, as always, appreciate you. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.